Welcome to another edition of the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and today we're going to talk about on-demand, right-size packaging with Sasha from Packsize. I've known Sasha for some years since CSCMP took a tour of a Staples distribution center like 10 years ago or more and saw these Packsize machines, and I think you were one of the hosts of that tour. And ever since then, I've always had you guys on my mind. I've always been telling people about you, and now to be able to talk to you, kind of interview you here on the podcast, it's a real treat.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Can you start out just by telling us a little bit more about yourself and kind of how we got to this point today of talking here on the podcast?
So I'm originally, I grew up in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
came to Texas when I was in my, I must have been like around 18. And of all things, I studied equine science. So I was riding American quarter horses in Germany,
Mm-hmm.
came over here, went to school, got a degree in equine science, and was like, horses are great, but it's really hard to make a living in it. So it's a great write-off maybe, but not to make a living. And so I shifted from there and I started exporting Wrangler cowboy cuts, boots, Western shirts to Germany. And I got exposed basically to that whole international business space and decided that's what I wanted to study. And then I took seminars and learned on how you can export. And that kind of slowly led me into international business, supply chains and things like that.
Okay. And then fast forward to today, I guess, and what you do. Yeah.
So in 2010, Packsize reached out to me because I worked for a Dallas-based CNC equipment company.
Oh, okay.
And basically developed, I had 30 countries that are developed for them around the world. And Henko Kiesner from Packsize, who's the founder of Packsize and his team, reached out and kind of recruited me, right? I wasn't necessarily looking at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a cool story about like a machine building a perfectly fitting box on the fly for anything you wanted to ship.
Yeah.
And this is pre-dimension shipping charges or anything like that, right? So this was a little bit out there back then. I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I would have never thought I'd be this long with a company.
Sure.
And I just love what I do here.
That says a lot about the business and the solutions that you sell, I guess, that you wake up kind of energized and ready to go tackle the day and make the day better and the world better one box at a time, I guess.
That's true. And what's so awesome about it, it's such an environmental game changer, right? So where you get to work and get paid and get to travel the US, meet awesome companies. Every day I have the privilege of walking into a pretty well-run distribution center for most parts. Mm-hmm. And we have a real impact on the environment as well. So not only do we really help the operation run a lot smoother by having perfectly fitting boxes, you use less material, you don't have to use void filler, but also in the outbound supply chain, we reduce CO2 emissions by almost 50%. And so if you just put all that together, mm-hmm. It's like you get the chance to be doing something very special that's changing the planet.
Yeah. And remind me where Packsize is based out of?
So we're headquartered in Salt Lake City. We mm-hmm. just opened, I think, a 250,000 square foot facility in Louisville, Kentucky as well, another technology center.
Uh-huh.
We have a little bit over 1,000 employees now, and we operate in over 20 countries with customers in over 20 countries.
Gotcha. And it's based, or like headquarters, it was founded out of Salt Lake, or is it from?
Correct. So it was originally founded by Henko Kiesner and his wife. Uh-huh. They're originally from Germany as well, but they very consciously said, we want to build this organization as a U.S. company.
Okay.
And it was built basically in Henko and his wife's parents' basement.
Uh-huh.
And it's very funny stories on how they built it. And
sure.
you would call the hotline and they'd be in the basement and he'd be like, oh, can I put you on hold?
Wow.
I'm going to try, because in the very early stage, we had to make it look a little bit bigger than it was, sure. Right? And so it's some...
Fake it till you make it, yeah.
It was incredible. And just the passion that was within the company to make this work and really take over the develop right-size packaging on demand is, I think, what they did in the early days.
To go from the garage or the basement type business to having Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies as customers, I guess that's kind of the Google or Microsoft or whatever stories as well. I mean, it's very similar, very humble beginnings and start into being a world class company later on.
That's correct.
Yeah. The basis for the idea, do you know where that came from? You know, what was the inspiration for?
I think it was in making a difference environmentally or anything,
Okay.
right? So I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes perfect sense, and I think that's where that came from. It's like there's so much waste, there's so much opportunity, and nobody has really tackled that issue, right? That big box with a tiny thing inside,
Right.
and where we really got our start was in the furniture industry. And the reason the furniture industry, they already had CNC equipment to make all their furniture and their kitchen cabinets and things like that. And they needed to get packaged as well. So they were actually the early adopters, because if you have a custom kitchen, right, each one is different now. You can't really put it in the standard boxes. So that's probably our first really mass market that we penetrated. And I would say we probably by far the largest provider for that space in the US.
I kind of knew that the furniture was a big industry or customer group for you. But until you just said custom, it didn't quite register with me, because I thought kind of, you go to Home Depot and you see all the standard sort of sizing. I was like, what does Packsize make sense for that? But you're right, on those one-off custom type designs where every customer order has unique dimensions.
And most of those are. So like if you look at now new multifamily buildings or new subdivisions that's getting built, they all have kitchens in them, right? And none of those are cookie cutter kitchens. I mean, they may be similar. So each one is unique, it's and I'm still now work on those projects from time to time, and it's just super cool seeing 1,000 cabinets roll off the line, each one different, and within a couple seconds, a Packsize machine makes a perfectly tight box on the end for it. So I still love what I do every day.
Yeah. And I guess you've maybe gotten to see the evolution of e-commerce, come to where it is today. I suppose maybe in the earlier days, like even before e-commerce, it was quite easy to just have a standard size box for everything, because it wasn't a very sophisticated sort of way of selling and retail. Kind of like Henry Ford, you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And so it wasn't very customized, but as we've progressed into the consumers that we are today, we're very picky. We want to custom size this. We want 3 things ordered and we want it packed in a particular way or whatnot. And so that's probably done you a favor, I guess.
It's true. It's multiple things, right? So I got a consumer now that's more environmentally conscious.
Sure.
Rightfully so, because everybody sees, I think we got a second hurricane about to hit Florida again within 2 weeks. So I think there is an awareness about that situation. I think the younger audience actually really is interested in that experience as well, and see what brands are conscious. But I think it's also the brands and the companies themselves, it's a money conversation, an efficiency conversation, right? So within Packsize on-demand solution, right? So every box is custom made on the fly for the order. So I'm going to use 20-25% less corrugated material, right? That's straight, and our material cost is commoditized. So out of the gate, you're going to save 20% on packaging material, just on the corrugated. Then the void filler material, we usually have about a 70-75% reduction, in some cases even 100% reduction in the void filler that goes inside those. That's usually been plastic in the past. That is gone. Right. And now when I ship these and I put them on the truck, I can get about twice as many shipments onto a FedEx, UPS, or whatever means I ship with. Right. It's economically, it's an absolute no-brainer as well.
Sure. And maybe even there's that labor piece of putting the void fill and kind of packing in and whatnot. Just a little bit of savings there as well.
100%. That's
100% savings.
No, but it depends on the platforms we deploy, because I get a lot of questions like that. And Packsize, I think what the company has done really well is have solutions for a small, like what we consider like a small e-commerce player is maybe 300 online orders. That's where we kind of come into once a company ships about 300 orders.
300 per day.
Per day.
Okay, yeah.
Roughly, right? So that's kind of, we have a solution for that.
Okay.
And then, but we also have solutions for 300,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have distribution centers right here within DFW that can handle 300,000 orders in a single day. And that humbles me to see these sites now.
Sure.
Because I remember 10 years ago or so, I'd be giddy if I walked in a site that had 20,000 and it's like, wow, this is awesome, right? And now you have these monster sites fully automated, and it's kind of, we now have kind of become almost the status quo for what's the best in class.
Sure.
And it's just great.
I kind of think it like the Band-Aid or the Kleenex of right size on demand packaging, I suppose.
Yeah, that's actually, I hear that every once in a while, that when I meet with potential clients, it's like, oh, we want to Packsize, or yeah. It's like,
it must make you feel warm and fuzzy then.
It does. It does.
And so in your role, what can you kind of just tell me about a little bit, like what your responsibility is there?
So my responsibility, I manage North Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and then I have several enterprise level national accounts as well. Mm-hmm. So my role is to engage with the decision-making unit to just kind of see if it makes sense, right? Because since we also finance these projects from our side, we want to make sure it's a real eye-level conversation of partnership to make sure we really drive value. So I engage with the senior decision makers usually to determine if a new site that comes up or so, if it makes sense, how it would impact their brand, mm-hmm. if the volumes are there, and just make sure these business cases pencil out before we invest too much time from both sides. Sure.
And what is anyone who's making an investment in changing things in their operations are doing it from an ROI type of perspective, and that's obviously always part of the conversation. What does that conversation sound like whenever they're talking to you, as far as achieving an ROI or something like that?
I think we're holistically look at it, and what I personally think what's the important part is to really connect with that team on the other side, because we from the outside may think, oh, it's these and these drivers, right? And we can bring some perspective to those conversations, but often companies have their own priority sets that came from the board, from their senior leadership teams. Right. And I think my role and my job is to really make sure we align well with that as well. We can bring outside perspective and saying, hey, here's kind of what's going on in the industry. How does that play with your perspectives? But in the end, we got to be very well aligned with what that company leadership is trying to accomplish. And if we can align well and have great ROIs, mm-hmm. which, by the way, usually our ROIs are under 1 year. I have plenty of projects that are 3 months ROIs. Wow. With kind of the business model we have. So sometimes I sit in meetings and people come like, hey, Sasha, why haven't we done this 2 years ago? Yeah. And it's like, it wasn't for me not trying, I can tell you that.
I had a chat with someone the other day that they were saying, we try to not be the best kept secret, which is really your goal. Whenever you're talking about that ROI sort of conversation, now we kind of see this whole robots as a service or packaging on demand as a service type of thing. Was that always the model, kind of the revenue generation or pricing model that was followed, or did you kind of have when things started out, you buy the machine and you buy the corrugate, or has that evolved over time?
I think when it first was started, very first, it was the thought was to sell the machines, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. and that didn't go very well. Yeah, this is early, before anybody thought it was cool, and that was hard because it was a hard conversation. You go to a company and say, hey, we have this great idea, this great concept, give us a $250,000 and we put one on your floor, right? And now I got to get approval for it. And then it really shifted, because then we were like, okay, how about we just put the machine on your floor and you just buy the material from us? Mm-hmm. And that's what really gave us a big lift. Yeah. And then over the years, we kind of went to a hybrid model where you say, buy the material from us, but we're going to have a monthly kind of maintenance, having the technology on the floor, kind of rental agreement, and really commodity, because we got to pay for the project somewhere. So we usually then put all the margin into the corrugated commodity, right? Mm. And sophisticated companies that have sophisticated buyers, they want that corrugated commoditized as much as they can. So then naturally it kind of went, okay, we have a technology bucket. So, and we kind of are now more heavy on the the equipment and the software side, and the corrugated is more commoditized. And we're, the best of my knowledge, we're the largest provider of corrugated material for equipment in distribution centers that runs through an on-demand solution.
Awesome. And the thing, I guess, if I recall, the kind of what's different from, for those who aren't familiar, if we put this in really simple terms, is your typical sort of warehouse has lots of boxes that are already cut on stacks of pallets sitting in the racks, and they've got 10 different sizes and whatnot. And in your solution, your corrugate is it in a roll, or it's a
Z-fold? It's a fan fold, right?
Yeah.
Z-fold. So it's a continuous piece of corrugated, 1,000 feet long.
Okay, yeah.
And the machine has different width that runs in it, so it grabs the right width, cuts it right to size. So we have two use scenarios. One is a distribution center, maybe somebody that has 10 box sizes right now. They just put it in the box, what they have right now, and the rest they fill with void filler and close it, right? So they ship about 50% air. If you take a broad sample, 50% air is about what you see in a traditional box. The other use is a high mix manufacturer environment, for example. Somebody that has maybe even 30 or 40 or 50 box sizes.
Okay.
And just it's a nightmare to manage it. So if you're out there and you have a warehouse full of corrugated racked all over, it may be also time to look at an on-demand solution.
Yeah. Just
because we can get rid of all these different box sizes. If you need 52 boxes a specific size, 2 minutes later you got them. While you don't have to call now a vendor and they convince you that you need to buy 200 or 500 boxes of that size. And so it's two scenarios.
From a resiliency, a common topic from over the past few years is how do you make your supply chain more resilient and kind of less exposed to changes in the market or supply delays and all that sort of stuff. And it seems like this is a great way to to kind of create some resiliency in a distribution center or manufacturing environment.
Absolutely. And just independence, right? I mean, you can run, you don't, like during COVID, we gained a tremendous amount of business during COVID because our supply chain held up, because most of the customers we work with, they require that. If one of our sites gets hit by a tornado, by a flood or whatever, and a lot of suppliers really struggled during COVID, and we just kept on running. And so even people that kind of looked at on demand, but they were kind of on the fence, it wasn't quite there, well, they all of a sudden were forced because they couldn't get supplies. And they called us and we had availability. And so we replaced a lot of equipment with new large customers now that just kind of got forced to. And now it's kind of the same conversation. Why haven't we done this years ago? So sometimes it takes a little bit of pain to have something great come out.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. We've talked a lot about Packsize and stuff here. Maybe let's take a step back and talk a little bit about kind of supply chain management and logistics, I guess, in general. What advice would you give to a student today that's in business school or something like that wants to kind of do what you do today? Classes, extracurricular type things, personal development type things they could do to be kind of sit in your seat one day.
I think just get out there. I think that's the biggest thing. Is just don't be afraid, or just go out and talk to people where you see an interest. And I think that's the number one thing that at some point I developed. I saw people that are either I don't know if admired is the right word, but I say, well, they got something figured out, right? They know how this works. They got this put together. Just go out and talk to them, and they will get you on the right track, right? Go and ask for that internship, or hey, I really want to get into your organization. So we have a lot of people at Packsize because we now build a pretty darn cool brand, I think. Yeah. Where people come to our company and say, that's basically, I want to be with your company. I don't care where do you want to put me on the bus, wherever you think I can fit best on this bus. Sure. And but they identify with that brand. So try to find what you really want to do and talk to those people that you maybe think really have influence or have advice, and just chat with them. Ask them if they can have a coffee. Yeah. Like we're chatting here, and I bet you'd be surprised how many people will actually let you do it. Yeah. I think I just had this conversation with someone yesterday, and
I think I would put it like at 90% or so of the people that you ask for help, that you reach out to and say, hey, can I pick your brain about something or whatnot? I think about 90% is probably like my success rate.
Look at that. Anything with a 90% success rate, right? I mean, you're crazy not doing it. But even if it was 20, all you have to do is ask 5 people.
There you go. Yeah, and you're done. When I was talking with Mark Baxa, who is president and CEO of CSEMP, had him on the other day, and he said, if you want to know about what's coming up ahead of the road in your career, ask someone who's coming back, right? Someone who's been there, someone who's seen it.
Exactly.
And that's, it took a while for me personally to get comfortable with asking for help, taking advice from folks that have been there and because I was a little bit younger, a little bit more naive, it felt like I had, I knew everything in the world and whatnot. And it's over time have realized, I've stumbled and fallen enough times and realized, oh my gosh, that advice that I was given, that was right. And so that feedback loop has happened enough times to know I should pay attention and really heed the words of wisdom.
No, and I think the people that have been there, they actually want to share that because they so wish somebody would have done that for them 5 or 10 years ago.
Right.
So I think because it gives them value as well. And I think often we don't recognize that, that somebody that has been there usually wants to give back. Yeah. And the best way for them to give back is to give somebody a leg up or advice that needs it, right? And So I think that's why I love mentorship programs and things like that. Even like at Packsize, I always loved it when there were new people coming in and I had an opportunity to work with them because I find it extremely rewarding.
Speaking of extremely rewarding, can you kind of share like kind of the peak or the pinnacle sort of accomplishment or experience that you've had in your career? That one best day, best experience that you've had.
Best experience. I don't know if I had a best. I mean, it's just been a journey, right? I mean, really, it's been a continuous journey, and I still feel that today, right? I'm like, this is part of my job. We got to meet here on a Monday morning and chat about this, right? I'm not sitting in a cubicle somewhere or so. And after this, I'm going to meet a client and tour their distribution center and talk about the issues they're having and the learnings they have. And then tomorrow I get to do it all over again in a different setting. So I love that. I think I love seeing my clients win, like on customers, clients, customer partners, whatever you want to name it. But it's really a partnership. And the most rewarding thing for me is we put together these business cases, we get it together, and then all of our projects we put a 90-day like pilot period on them. So it's kind of to give the customer so they feel better about executing it, right? Because they're always, sometimes they still don't fully maybe have it comprehended now. So we give them, when we do these contracts, we say, hey, we're going to put a 90-day period on it, that everything we put in the business case, it's on the up and up, right? And that was our founder, I think, Henko Kiesner, who said, I want these contracts written this way. Yeah. Which is great, right? Because now it puts the monkey kind of on our back, and the sales team, the engineers, to really deliver to the client what we put on paper for them. Yeah. And I think the most important thing for me is once we go live and the customer is like, oh man, it's like, why haven't we done this 3 years ago? And so I love that. It's so great.
Okay. The flip side of the what's your best day at work story is the what was your worst day at work story. That thing where something fell through the cracks, things, kind of that learning opportunity in hindsight, right? But do you have one of those stories where
I think
just dropped the ball and I think it's great for others to hear where other people have stumbled so they can see that things can go really, really bad and you can recover, you can learn from it and move on and be okay.
I think it's a classic sales story in general, right? Which is you think you have it all together. You think you have the decision-making unit all figured out. Everybody's aligned. Everybody is good. Big project, right? And then you get right there. And then like at the 2-yard line, the whole thing falls apart on you. Yeah. And you almost can't figure out what the heck happened. I mean, usually you end up knowing in the back. But and I think that happens, like sometimes when I work on really large deals or so, the challenge is so there is a lot of rotation in management teams.
Yes,
so and these projects are big projects. They sometimes take a year,
right,
15, 16 months to full circle from first contact to signing the contract or implementing. And there's a lot of DMU, decision-making unit members, that move around in the company. And then, that guy moved to Singapore now, and that guy is now running our Chicago operation.
Yeah.
And or the company gets sold, so I think that's sometimes what you do your best to get it all figured out,
right,
and you become better and better at it. But sometimes it just goes.
I mean, it's external circumstances, and I guess you've probably experienced it enough now that you kind of know the playbook of, okay, all right, so the person who was supposed to be signing off on this is now no longer that person signing off, and then you kind of got to go pitch and sell and bring someone else up to speed and try to get them to that same place as what their predecessor was before.
That's right.
Like that. Yeah.
But I think the advantage about hanging around, and I don't know, hanging around is the right term, but sticking with a company, with a great company, is a lot of the business that I get now is companies that I may talk to maybe 4 or 5 years, and was an incredible engagement, right? But for whatever reason, they weren't ready as an organization to take this on.
Yeah.
But now you have the trust established. You really done a professional job. These people that bring you into their organizations, and that what they do is they need to have a deep trust in you, because they're letting you in their inner circle. And if as deep as we touch organizations, if you mess up, like if we would just mess up, they lose their job. There is no doubt about it in my mind, right? So there is a deep trust. That's why we really engage very deep and vet these projects through. And I think when you can establish that trust, and that then they know that you have that understanding, I think then the gates really open, and you can have a real open partnership. And you can also even talk about if a project is maybe not the right time. And I drive that in these conversations. And I think it just, in the end, builds trust. In the end, it builds much better relationships and much better projects.
Sure. Talking to Ryan Howard some episodes ago, he also mentioned that the person who's kind of your champion and is kind of like carrying the message forward in the organization, their career is riding a little bit on it, just as you mentioned, and a successful implementation and whatnot is great for them, right? It helps gain them credibility and everything. Right?
And that's often the conversation that I have. So like at some point, right, you start working on these big projects, and we do sit then in these conference rooms with these either small teams or sometimes one main leader, right? And those are the conversations that we have a lot. It's like, what do you guys really want to accomplish here, right? Not what do we really want, what you really want to accomplish here. Also, how do you see your next steps in the organization, and how can we, Packsize, help with that, right? So if you're a sustainability leader, if you're a supply chain leader, and to really understand how that organization measures them and their teams, and anything else that doesn't really matter that much, because it's those teams that are likely overworked already now taking on and prioritizing a project. And if you can really align with them and make them successful, it runs. And that's why I like private equity firms, actually, because usually I find those teams in private equity firms, and if they have a broad portfolio, it just makes my life a lot easier, because they now develop the trust. So I work with private equity firms that after we've done a couple of projects, they're like, wow, just the ROIs are crazy for these projects, right?
Yeah.
And so as soon as they acquire a company, they would fly me out and say, please give them the books. And it's a deep trust, right? If I would ever go and kind of, nobody's really watching, that's not how that works, right? It's a deep trust. But once you have that, I really enjoy these partnerships.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, the last sort of thing we'll leave with is I always try to give kind of all my guests an opportunity to talk about whatever's most interesting or what's kind of on their mind at the moment. And they kind of want to make sure that everyone that was listening and watching kind of takes away from this conversation, either, like a professional type takeaway or something about the business. But I always want to give you kind of that opportunity to stand on your soapbox and
I don't know if I have a soapbox. I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit. I think what's really awesome is the mentorship. I think just coming together. I mean, in the end, we're all here on this planet, right? So we gotta. That's why I love Packsize, and what we do is we make the planet better from CO2 emissions and everything. Just helping each other out, right? And I think that's the most important thing. Letting people do, and if somebody needs help, you help them and bring them up. And that's why. So I'm gonna reach out to me if you feel I can be helpful, or send me a note. You know, I may not be, and I will tell you if I don't think I am, but I will at least think about it, and then send you to Nathan that says, because I mean you're really well plugged into the community here too, and I think it's rewarding. I love helping people, and I think if you lead with helping people first, I think good things will come.
The rest takes care of itself.
Yeah,
that's a common theme. A lot of these conversations, everyone seems to be circling back to that idea of just we all are just little connector of the dots, and sometimes the dots that you help connect benefit you personally or professionally, and sometimes it's for someone else's benefit that day, but in the end, that kind of circle comes back and karma rewards you for just helping out.
100%. And I think the secret is not keeping score, right? So that's like, if you look at the people that really do this well, and you and I, we know connectors, and I would think we probably count ourselves a little bit in being well connected in the community, is that you genuinely help people.
Sure.
And it always comes back.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for chatting with us today, Sasha. Sharing a little bit about your history with Packsize and talking to us about the business a bit.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.